May Madness Presidential Tournament. We have four awesome debaters on stage today. We have, representing President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Lachlan Newell. Representing President Dwight Eisenhower, Elise Mason. Representing Lyndon Johnson, we have Dax Martin. And representing President Barack Obama, we have Miles Whitfield. So, first of all, I just want to say thank you to these students who are up here today. They have been working incredibly hard. All of you have been working incredibly hard on these presidential papers and debates. These four individuals have worked extremely hard, made it to the top of their cohort, and then continue to work hard through exam week to be up here on stage. And so I want to thank them for all of their hard work and effort. I want to thank the judges that are here today. I want to thank Ms. Townsend, who is here. I want to thank Hannah Smokler and Bo Meredith, who are former 8th grade champions who have come back to help judge, Dr. Buchanan and Mr. Bramer as well. And also thank you to Mr. Schneider. It's been really fun working on this project with you. Audience, okay? This is not your time to shine. This is the time for these four debaters to shine. You guys know what it takes to be a good audience, right? You're respectful, you listen. When it's time to applaud, you applaud. We never boo, right? We never make negative comments as an audience. We're here to support all four of these individuals up on stage, and we know how to be appropriate members of the audience. I want to thank you in advance for being good audience members. We're going to start out today with 4 campaign ad videos that represent these presidents. And so we'll go ahead and get started.
It's just great to have you there where you belong. You're looking swell, Lyndon, we can tell. Lyndon, you're still glowing, you're still growing, you're still going strong.
We hear the band playing and the folks saying,
you're the man who knows just how to get things done. So, wow, oh, wow, fellas, look at that guy go now, fellas. The whole darn world agrees that he's the one.
And where we are met with cynicism and doubt and those who tell us that we can't, we will respond with that timeless creed that sums up the spirit of a people. Yes, we can.
Yes, 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 it's time. We all come together. Ha ha! Barack Obama.
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Barack Obama. Man, he's coming with a message for the people saying, yes, we can. Sure. See, throw your hands up, every woman, every man. Barack Obama.
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Barack Obama. Barack Obama. Swan. Building blocks of a new vow. The reign of a power to the people so that we may direct.
Okay, so students, just like we've done in the debates, we're going to start out with opening statements, then we're going to go into criteria demonstrating success, then our debaters will have questions that they'll answer, and then we'll finish out with closing arguments, okay? We're going to go in chronological order, and so we're going to begin with Lachlan. Debaters, you may remain seated at your table, you may stand up behind your spot, or you may get up and walk. Anything is fine. All right. So let's put our hands together for Lachlan Newell. You can take your mask off while you're speaking.
Check one. Check one, check two. FDR was president for 12 years, those being 1933 to 1945. In those 12 years, he did so much in the Foreign Affairs Department, Domestic Affairs Department, and handled his crises better than any other president. He fixed almost all of the problems that America had, mainly the Great Depression and the financial system. In the Foreign Department, World War II was won under his leadership. When Roosevelt was elected, America looked terrible, but somehow, by the end of his time in office, he made our future look very bright.
Who's the man of the hour? The 34th president. He stands in a room full of every president that the United States has ever elected, but does not stand beside them. He stands in front because he knows that he has earned the title of the greatest president in the United States. A man for the people, a man who stopped communism, a man who modernized America. He put everything he had, from the significant civil rights movements to the largest foreign policies. He was a leader, a general, a father, and overall America's president. He stands firm in the foreground and pays no attention to the ones that try to knock him down, because they can't and never will. Everybody give it up for Dwight D. Eisenhower.
In today's world, there have been numerous protests that African Americans are not treated equally to whites. Almost 50 years ago, President Johnson was dealing with similar issues. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was leading protests in the South to try and ban segregation and discrimination. Today, protesters have filled the streets to try and gain equality. The big difference is how these protests were handled. Some politicians today have failed to take initiative and make a change. President Johnson was different. By the end of his presidency, he had banned segregation and discrimination, gave equal voting rights for all, and gave equal rights to housing for all. Everyone should wonder, if President Johnson was our president today, how would he handle our issues? He would handle the crises we face today effectively. He would open up opportunities for all throughout his domestic policies. He would pursue equal justice for all, and he would do this by never wavering in Congress.
Barack Obama is America's most outstanding president. His leadership and charisma were unmatched by any president we've ever seen. The words Obama put fear into enemies and joy into the American people. O for outstanding, B for bravery, A for ambition, M for masterful, and the final A for accomplishment. Not only wasn't Obama a speaker that could captivate any audience, he was also a complex thinker and policymaker. He was willing to fight for what he believed in a pursuit of justice. As Barack Obama once said, nothing in life that's worth anything is easy.
Lachlan, go ahead with your criteria demonstrating success.
I pledge myself a new deal for the American people. When Roosevelt was elected, America was in terrible condition, and there were three main problems: the Great Depression, the financial system, and the economic disaster. To fix these things, Roosevelt created the New Deal. And in the first 100 days of being in office, he got 14 bills passed to help end the economic troubles. For the financial system. For the financial system, he created a plan, and he had the federal government inspect each bank and reopen the ones that were closed. In the following weeks, $1 billion were returned to America's banks. Now, ending the Great Depression would be a little bit harder, and the New Deal that he created had done a lot, and it helped a lot of people, but it couldn't end it. The only way to end it was to go to war. So unexpectedly, Roosevelt led us into World War II, which did end the Great Depression, and also sparked jobs being created to help end the economic troubles. Everything that Roosevelt did in the Foreign Department was amazing. The first thing he did was he saved our relationship with the Soviet Union, tying official ties between the nations. Then he earned America the most national trade status because of his good neighbor tactics towards Latin America. And then the big one, he helped us win World War II. When the war started, Roosevelt decided that we would stay out of the war, and he respected what the American people wanted. They did not want to join the war, so he decided we will not join unless we are forced into it. Well, obviously Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, and we were forced into the war. Inside of the war, Roosevelt made military strategy, appointed key commanders, and helped the development of the atomic bomb. He also made us join the Allies and came up with the idea of attacking Italy, going up into France, and preparing for D-Day. There were two main crises that occurred during Roosevelt's presidency. And the first one he was elected into, and this was the Great Depression. The Great Depression affected every single person in America, and it made America in terrible condition. And this is where the other crisis kind of comes along with this one. So America was in such bad condition that Roosevelt decided we would stay out of World War II. And we weren't prepared, we weren't ready, and so he decided we'll stay out of it. But then Obviously, we were surprise attacked by Japan and forced into it. That's just the definition of a crisis to me. We were not prepared, we did not want to join the war, but we were forced into it. Roosevelt stayed calm, led us into the war, and we won World War II. And it also didn't only fix that crisis, but it ended the Great Depression. Now you know that Roosevelt was good at a lot of things, but something you didn't know was that he actually had an amazing relationship with the public. Let me remind you, he was elected 4 separate times, each time blowing out the other candidate for the office. So reasons for this was he didn't go against the American public too much. He normally agreed with them, and he respected what they had to say. Obviously, unless he was forced against it, but he normally stayed with them. Another reason is he created these things called fireside chats, which is where he inspired the nation using his voice. Everything that Roosevelt did during his presidency was amazing.
Eisenhower was able to establish a successful foreign policy. He did this by first ending the Korean War. North Communist Korea was trying to take over South Korea. He was able to stop the spread of communism in Korea, and he did this without the use of nuclear weapons. Eisenhower also established the Eisenhower Doctrine, which stated that a country could request the U.S.'s economic or military help if they were in a state of military crisis or being threatened by military hostility. This made relieved lots of countries to know that the U.S. would have their back if they were being attacked by communism. Eisenhower also created the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, which made sure that no countries were furthering their military with the use of atomic weaponry. This is very important to make sure countries all over the world were not fighting battles and using atomic energy. While Eisenhower was doing all of this to help successful foreign policy, why did FDR not listen to all of the warnings about Pearl Harbor? Billy Mitchell clearly predicted it would happen. If he would have acted sooner, then 2,000 men wouldn't have died. Why did LBJ lose the first war that America has ever lost, which cost 53,000 lives? You see, Eisenhower was able to craft a successful foreign policy, but those presidents were not. Eisenhower was also all about equal justice for all of his citizens. That is why he started the 1957 Civil Rights Act, which made it illegal to restrict the right to vote for American citizens. He saw that African Americans' voting rights were being restricted. They should be able to safely vote in their own country's elections. So that is why he signed this act. He also sent 1,000 of the U.S.'s 101st Airborne Unit to Little Rock, Arkansas. He did this to protect kids like the Little Rock Nine so that they could safely desegregate schools. Well, Eisenhower was all for giving his people equality. Why did LBJ say behind closed doors that Thurgood Marshall and his Civil Rights Act, he called them racial slurs? Why did FDR intern thousands of Japanese Americans? It was never proved that any Japanese Americans were actually Japanese spies. He made them lose their money and their houses and sent them to live in terrible internment camps. Eisenhower also excelled in his domestic policy. During his time in office, federal spending decreased from 20.4% to 18.4%. He didn't do this only once, he did it 3 times. Eisenhower also raised personal income by 45%. People were able to get their first television and second car. Eisenhower created the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare and the interstate system, which constructed 41,000 miles of interstate. He is the reason we are able to get around the U.S. so easily and quickly today. Well, Eisenhower was excelling in domestic policy. Why did Obama create Obamacare, which added $1 trillion to the U.S. debt? Everybody liked Ike. That is why he was so popular. Eisenhower was the first Republican president in 20 years to be elected, but neither the Democrats or Republicans cared because everybody wanted him in office. Eisenhower was the first president to allow TV cameras in his news conferences, so people all over the U.S. could see what he was up to. Eisenhower was also the first president to govern over all 50 states, because Hawaii and Alaska became states during his presidency. One of the main reasons Eisenhower gained his popularity was because he kept his main campaign promise, that he was going to go to Korea, visit with the soldiers, and find a way to end the Korean War. Do you know what he did when he became president? He went to Korea, visited with the soldiers, and ended the Korean War. I can't say so about my other opponents, because Obama was the one that started the terrible disagreement between the Republican and Democratic Party that is still going on today. FDR is the reason that thousands of Japanese Americans weren't on his side and voting for him. And then lastly, LBJ had his own people take pride in saying, hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today? You see, Eisenhower won the vote of his people, and I say that is why he is the greatest president of the United States.
President Johnson is the most successful president of all time. One reason is because he managed crises effectively. When JFK died, America was in remorse of their former president. They didn't know who would become their leader, the rock for them to lean on. President Johnson became that man. He used his words to provide Americans with inspiration, but more importantly, he took action. He investigated the death of Kennedy to provide Americans with knowledge, and he implemented some of Kennedy's main initiatives, like a big tax cut. Also, he signed the Outer Space Treaty. This stated that all exploration of space should be done for the benefit of all countries. This cleared tensions with Soviet Russia, protecting American citizens. And this treaty still lasts today. Johnson also fought racial injustice. This was part of his program of a great society. This would be an end to poverty and racial injustice. For this racial injustice part, he signed acts like the Civil Rights Act to ban segregation and discrimination. He signed the Voting Rights Act to give equal rights to voting for all. And he signed the Fair Housing Act to give equal rights to housing for all. To go on top of that, he's appointed the first black Supreme Court Justice, Thurgood Marshall. Eisenhower, on the other hand, started the interstate highway system, which split up black neighborhoods, causing black businesses to fail. Johnson also worked towards gaining equal opportunity for all through his poverty programs. To make sure this was taken seriously, he created CAAs, or Community Action Agencies. These would coordinate all federal programs for the poor. Some of these programs were Medicare and Medicaid to provide health benefits for the elderly and poor. He also started Head Start, which got poor youths ready for school. And he had job training, which provided job supports and other supports for youths. Obama, on the other hand, ruined our economy by starting Obamacare, making uncovered Americans lose $700 a year and raising our national debt to $20 trillion. Johnson lowered our federal tax rate from 91% to 70%, causing a significant decline in poverty. Johnson did all this by never wavering in Congress. He was born with a special ability to get people to believe in what he wanted. This transformed the relationship between the legislative and executive branches. He would constantly be at Capitol Hill, trying to build relationships with congressmen to get his acts passed. One of these congressmen is Clarence Mitchell Jr., who is a black senator. He was another civil rights activist, and together they paired up to get the Civil Rights, Voting Rights, and Fair Housing Rights Acts passed. While Johnson did great in the legislative, executive, and judicial branches, FDR did not. He tried packing the Supreme Court, which is unconstitutional, just so he could get his acts passed. Johnson was a far superior president than all of these other presidents in all of the most important presidential criteria. This is what makes him the most successful president.
So some quick background information on the criteria. Ms. Brantley gave us 8 criteria we could choose, and we chose 4, and the 4 I will talk about, I believe, best demonstrate Obama. So the first thing is his crisis management. He inherited the Great Recession, which was the greatest period of economic downturn since the original Great Depression, and thanks to his American Jobs Act, his tax cuts, as well as the stimulus package he released, it was put way behind him, and it decreased the unemployment rate. That was decreasing even up until the coronavirus pandemic. It was on a downward slope. I'm not sure the exact slope. Maybe I can ask Ms. Hesse. But he did a great job to defeat it. Unlike LBJ, who under his administration, the recession of 1968 happened, and also Eisenhower under her administration, the 1958 recession happened, which was also known as, funnily enough, the Eisenhower recession because he had caused it. Secondly, he killed terrorist leader Osama bin Laden, who was the head of Al-Qaeda, the terrorist group that was responsible for the 9/11 attacks on September 11, 2001, which was an extremely sad day for our country. He was able to track him down and kill him after being on the run for 10 years from the CIA, and it made the world a much safer place. Secondly, he helped defeat Hurricane Sandy, which was a deadly hurricane that hit New Jersey. I personally have family in New Jersey, and he did a great job to take care of them. And he was praised for his very proactive approach. He canceled many campaign meetings and campaign rallies in order for him to see these areas in New Jersey that were being affected. And he was praised by people on both sides of the aisle, Democratic and Republican. Secondly, is his domestic policy. So it's the policy that took place within the United States. His domestic policy was extremely effective, such as his Obamacare plan, also known as the Affordable Care Act. So at the time, 16% of Americans, or 49 million Americans total, did not have health care. But as soon as the plan was introduced, that number was cut in half, which was extremely effective, obviously. It also helped people with cancer and other pre-existing conditions get health care because before insurance companies could deny them health care access, but he helped do that. Secondly, he introduced the Consumer Protection Act, which, as the name suggests, it protects consumers. And it also is put in place to help prevent recessions from happening. While the New Deal that FDR released, I know Lachlan said it was positive. It was not positive at all, because according to a study made in 2004 by some UCLA economists, it was actually determined that the New Deal extended the Great Depression by as much as 7 years. So thirdly, I should say, is the foreign policy. So Obama is just heads and shoulders above these presidents in foreign policy. It's just clear. They're the students, Obama's the teacher. So first off, for his foreign policy, he won a Nobel Peace Prize only 1 year in the office, which is extremely unheard of. No president has ever done that. He became one of only 3 presidents to win it, but he only did it within 1 year in office, joining Wilson and Teddy Roosevelt. And secondly, he signed the Iran nuclear deal, which was an extremely effective deal. It was probably one of his biggest successes as a president. So what the deal entailed, for those who do not know, it released tariffs and embargoes off the Iran government in exchange for them to disband and give away nukes that they had, and it made the world a much safer place because the Iranian government was very unstable. And Elise, you might want to plug your ears, so I'm about to go off on Eisenhower. So basically, he had overthrew the democratically elected leader of Iran, which caused a lasting rift between the U.S. and Iran, which led to events like the Iran hostage crisis. And Obama had to come in and really save the country from the Iran rift. Secondly, I talked about how it was a nuclear deal. Eisenhower has a very bad reputation with nukes. He threatened to use nukes to end the Korean War, and he also threatened to use nukes to blow up the moon. Yes, you did hear that right. Obviously, I'm no scientist. You can ask Ms. Perkins, but I don't think that's a good idea to blow up the moon. And then lastly, he also removed troops from Iraq and Afghanistan. So lastly, this is equal justice for all. Obama strongly believed in equal justice for all. It's like these presidents are racing to see who is the most racist and who cares the least about equal justice for all. So in an article by The Atlantic, it was said that Obama was the greatest force of equality since MLK. And LBJ knows something about MLK because he called him, I quote, a nigger preacher, after he had spoke out against his handling of Vietnam. Secondly, Eisenhower was very reluctant to send troops down to Little Rock, Arkansas, where a little girl was going to unsegregated school. And he was very reluctant, and he called it one of the low points of his presidency. Lastly, Lachlan, I don't even have to talk about FDR that much because we all know Japanese internment camps. But the first act in his Equal Justice for All was Fair Pay Act, which helped fight pay discrepancies between men and women, and it was an extremely effective act in fighting these inequalities. And then lastly is he legalized same-sex marriage in 2015 by repealing the Don't Ask, Don't Tell Act, which discriminated against LGBTQ Americans. And in 2015, on a 5-4 vote on the Supreme Court, it was legalized, and 2 of the judges that he had appointed voted yes on it, including Sonia Sotomayor, who was the first Hispanic woman ever appointed to the Supreme Court. I can go on and on for days about Obama is the better president, but we do have summer break next week, and I don't want to hold you guys till there, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we are going to ask each of our debaters 2 questions, and we'll ask you both of your questions. You'll give both of your responses, and then we'll move on to the next debater. So Lachlan, you'll go first. All right. FDR's Executive Order 9066, which placed all Japanese Americans living on the West Coast in internment camps, is seen as one of his worst legacies because it denied critical civil rights and liberties to American citizens of Japanese descent. None of the internees in the camps were ever found to have engaged in espionage or treason. And in 1988, Ronald Reagan signed legislation apologizing for the camps during World War II, calling them, quote, a grave wrong. How can FDR be considered the greatest president when he denied the rights of life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness to American citizens based on their race?
So to answer this question, you kind of have to look at where America was at the time. So we were in the midst of a Great Depression, and we were obviously forced to join a war where we were bombed by Japan, and we did not want to join. We had to act fast, and when you think about it, we couldn't take the risk in hope that the Japanese Americans were not spying for the Japanese government. Because if we didn't take that risk and when we let them be free, then there could have possibly been another surprise attack on the United States, and we could have possibly won the war. So, I mean, yeah, a lot of people think of it as a dark time, but really, this was a decision that had to be made, and it ultimately was the correct decision.
Thank you.
Okay, question number 2, Lachlan. FDR was often criticized for trying to be too much like a dictator. He was the first president to break George Washington's important precedent of serving only 2 terms in office, and when the Supreme Court struck down parts of his New Deal laws, he attempted to pack the court by adding justices friendly to his plans. Was FDR an undemocratic president because of these actions?
Am I allowed to talk to my teammates about this?
Not today.
Oh, can you read like the last sentence, just like the question line?
The final sentence was FDR an undemocratic president because of these actions?
I don't think so. Yeah, he definitely was not. So you talked about how he broke Washington's amendment and he was president for more than 2 terms, when that wasn't completely his decision. So when you look at the time, the American public obviously loved FDR, and they did not want him to leave. So he had already been elected 3 times, and it was about to be his 4th term. And the American public obviously did not want to change presidents during the middle of a war, so they decided to keep him around. And after his 2nd term, they decided to keep him because they felt that the public decided, and they felt that he was doing a very good job on ending the Great Depression, even though his New Deal couldn't end it. They felt that he was doing a great job, so it was really their choice to do this. And I'm not really sure about the other part of the sentence. I can't really remember what it was, the other part about the senators or something.
Yeah, it was a question with 2 parts. The second was, when the Supreme Court struck down parts of his New Deal laws, he attempted to pack the court by adding justices friendly to his plans.
I don't really feel that this is undemocratic because what he wanted to do for the U.S., it might not have been able to happen. And he was the president, and he had a pretty good view. And like I said, he always went with the American public. So he had good reason to do this. He wanted to end the Great Depression. He wanted to save the economy. So I believe that when he did these, he had good reasoning for it. And that's ultimately why I believe that it was okay.
Thank you, Lachlan. Let's give him a round of applause. Okay, Elise. Eisenhower was president during the famous Brown versus Board of Education Supreme Court case that desegregated schools in this country. However, he is famous for responding to the decision with silence, rather than celebrating the decision for what it did to help achieve equal justice for all. How can you reconcile that with your claims that he did, in fact, pursue equal justice for all?
Well, it's not like he said anything against it. Silence can be good, and he was for to desegregate schools in the first place, or he wouldn't have sent 1,000 soldiers to Little Rock, Arkansas. So he was for this, and he believed in a more silent approach to many things, and so one of them was the civil rights movement, and so he decided to, I guess, silent celebrate for this act.
Question number 2. Eisenhower signed the bill introducing the phrase "under God" into the Pledge of Allegiance. Does this violate the...
Michaela, Batten, and the Schneider girls, please come to hook up.
I'll repeat the whole question.
Okay, thank you.
Eisenhower signed the bill introducing the phrase "under God" into the Pledge of Allegiance. Does this violate the separation of church and state, and how does it support your argument about equal justice for all?
No, so the U.S. was in a tight place because...
Daniel Downey, please come to hook up. Daniel Downey, please come to hook up.
Okay.
You're doing great, Elise. Sorry.
Thank you. communism was the main thing that was interfering with America at this time. So the word under God, putting in the Pledge of Allegiance, made unified the U.S. more. Also, it says under God. Does it say under Jesus, under Muhammad, under Moses? No. So anybody who says the Pledge of Allegiance gets to put whatever religion they believe in into those words. Also, in America, you have the freedom of exercise of religion. So people who say are atheist can choose not to say those words. And it has been many years since Eisenhower's been president and passed that act. So if it was really a major problem, then why have no president since him changed it?
Thank you, Elise. Dax? LBJ is infamous for pushing through the Gulf of Tonkin resolution in Congress, which many historians believe to have been built on falsehoods. This allowed him to commit hundreds of thousands of troops to the ill-fated war in Vietnam, the only war the U.S. has ever lost. How do you justify Johnson's actions related to both the resolution and in the war?
While the facts on what happened in the Gulf of Tonkin may not be straight, the straight facts are that troops were needed in Vietnam. The northern Vietnamese government and the Viet Cong were taking over Vietnam and making Vietnam communist, which could have been a big problem to the world. Congress believed that this Gulf of Tonkin resolution needed to be passed, and this was part of the reason it was passed. Not only did the South Vietnamese people need the help, but also the world did. Because if communism spread in Vietnam, communism could have spread throughout Asia, causing a much bigger problem than just a little country in Southeast Asia.
Okay, Dax, when Johnson came into office, his approval...
Betsy Hartright, please hurry to hook up. Betsy Hartright, please hurry to hook up.
When Johnson came into office, his approval rating was an extremely high 78%. By the end of his first full term in office, however, it was down to an incredibly low 36%, in large part due to the public's dissatisfaction with the war in Vietnam and Johnson's decisions around it. In fact, Johnson chose not to run for re-election due to the lack of popularity. How can he make the claim that he is our nation's most successful president with approval drops like this, and due to the fact that he did not even run for a second term?
First of all, the reason Johnson's approval ratings were so low is because it was an impossible time. These were words said by Dr. King when he was on the phone with President Johnson, and Johnson didn't know what to do and was asking for help. The situation in Vietnam was impossible. Send troops and they're probably going to die. Or don't send troops and let communism spread throughout Asia. He didn't really know what to do, and really no one knew what to do. Also, the reason Johnson didn't run for re-election was because of how selfless he was. He focused more on gaining peace for the southern Vietnamese people than himself and running for re-election. He was willing to sacrifice his political career to try and help the southern Vietnamese people in the world.
Thank you, Dax. Miles. Obama's time in office saw the rise of ISIS in Iraq and Syria. This gripped the nation and the world with fear. Obama actually downplayed ISIS when they first emerged, which meant that the U.S. was not ready for their rapid rise. Ultimately, Obama had to send troops back into the Middle East after claiming victory in Iraq not long before. How can you claim Obama's foreign policy success with this record on ISIS?
It's pretty unfair to blame Obama for the rise in ISIS because you have to look at what he was dealing with. First off, at the end of World War I, there was a Sykes-Picot Agreement that was signed by the French and the British, which caused political turmoil in the Middle East in general, which led to uprising of ISIS and other terrorist groups. And you spoke about how he had to send troops back in. He had withdrawn troops because he was gaining so much criticism for being in this area, so it's really a lose-lose situation. Either way, if he keeps the troops in those areas, people are going to criticize him. Obama, why are you fighting over there in wars that are not related to the U.S.? But then if he pulls out and ISIS emerges, then people are going to get onto him about that type of thing. And secondly, he was also was attacking ISIS in certain areas like Syria. Syria was a hive for ISIS activity, and he was sending in bombers and people to that area.
Thank you.
All right, final question. Perhaps the biggest criticism of Obama is that under his presidency, he gained while the Democratic Party lost, and tensions rose between the two parties and within the nation. Obama himself is quoted as saying, "It's one of the few regrets of my presidency that the rancor and suspicion between the parties has gotten worse instead of better. There's no doubt a president with the gifts of Lincoln or Roosevelt might have better bridged the divide, and I guarantee I'll keep trying to be better so long as I hold this office." How can you claim that Obama is the most successful president with this legacy hanging over his time in office?
Well, firstly, I think it's unfair to blame Obama solely for this because obviously in a part of divide, there's going to be a divide on each side. First off, you have to look at what Senator Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said. He said that the greatest goal of the Republican Senate is to make Obama a one-term president, which obviously that's going to cause a lot of divide if the man that is supposed to be helping the American people can't get any laws passed because his senators are directly going against him just to make sure he cannot get anything done. Secondly, he talked about how the Democratic Party lost seats while Obama was still in office. That happened to pretty much many other presidents, like Joe Biden, for example. The Democrats lost seats even though he won election. That's an extremely common thing to happen. And overall, I just don't think you can blame Obama for this solely because there's people on both sides of the aisle that cause it, whether it be Democrats, Republicans. I think there's not many leaders that could be put in that situation with and still be successful. I don't think any of these presidents could do that.
Thank you, Miles. All right. Those questions are hard, and so you guys need to give your classmates a big round of applause for handling them. All right. Last thing, closing statements. Close it out.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt was president for 12 years. And in those years, there was 4 main things that he needed to do. These were end the Great Depression, save the financial system, fix the economic disaster, and win World War II. He did all of these things and much more. He was amazing in every way possible. His foreign policy was amazing. His domestic policy was amazing. He handled his crises better than any other president. And he had an amazing relationship with the public. When Roosevelt was elected, America looked the worst that it has ever looked. But somehow, by the end of his time in office, he turned America into a global powerhouse and made our future look very bright.
Where would America be today without the accomplishments of Eisenhower? When I think of Eisenhower, I see a man who started school desegregation, one who tried so hard to stop the spread of communism, one who started the interstate system, one who created NASA, one who lowered federal spending, and overall, somebody who was loved by all of his people. When I think of FDR, I remember those thousands of Japanese Americans sitting in the internment camps. When I think of Obama, I think of the divide between the Democratic and Republican Party that is still getting worse today. When I think of LBJ, I think of the 53,000 names inscribed on the Vietnam War Memorial Wall. You see, none of these presidents can claim the title of the best president of America because it is proven that they are not. Their failures shine brighter than their accomplishments. Eisenhower is standing in the front grinning because he knows that he did everything in his power to make sure America is the prosperous, balanced place it is today. And just remember, he's the man of the hour. Everybody loved Eisenhower.
Until justice is blind to color, until education is unaware of race, and until opportunity isn't judged by the color of one man's skin, emancipation is a proclamation, but not a fact. This is the mentality Johnson had when working towards equal rights. From talking to Dr. King to signing the Civil Rights, Voting Rights, and Fair Housing Act, Johnson was always working for equality. While this is what makes his presidency memorable and special, this is not all he did. He saved the presidency after JFK's death. He got governmental help for the poor. He signed the Outer Space Treaty, and he was a prominent figure in Congress. Eisenhower escalated the Cold War. Obama made the American economy plummet, and FDR started the idea that progressive intellectuals could run an economy. Johnson obviously sits on top of these presidents in the presidential pyramid, which is what makes him the most successful president.
Barack Obama once said, change happens because ordinary people do extraordinary things. This quote applies to Obama more than any other person in history. He was born to a single mother in Hawaii. With hard work and dedication, he got a Harvard Law degree, became senator, and later became president. While in office, he made changes to help ordinary people like himself. He made changes to healthcare and helped working Americans. He knew the system wasn't perfect and took action to make changes. Now that Obama left office nearly half a decade ago, we can see the changes that were made, all because an ordinary person did some extraordinary things.
Okay. Do any of the judges want to say anything before we close it out? Y'all are welcome to say anything at all. Let's give these 4 debaters another big round of applause. Thank you guys for being a great audience. In just a minute, we're going to dismiss. I'm going to have the 4 debaters stay behind for a quick picture. The plan right now, and judges, if you guys could stay behind for just a second too. The plan right now is to return to homeroom, okay? If you brought a sign or papers or anything like that, you need to take it with you. And so we need to leave this space nice and clean. You need to go back to homeroom, and when we are in homeroom, we've got a little bit of time, so we're going to kind of hang tight in homeroom. You want to make sure that if you are changing at all to go over to the park, you can do that. You need to make sure that you leave phones behind, and you can also leave backpacks behind, and the rooms will be locked while we're gone. So if the students, if we could start with cohorts 1 and 3, if you guys could get up and head back to your homerooms, that would be great.